Hello everyone, welcome to the session. We'll be discussing about default methods in interface. So let's start the session default methods in interface. At the end of the session, you will be able to learn about default methods in interfaces in Java. So when we talk about interfaces, a concept or interface is a terminology which is used for the purpose of achieving abstraction in Java. Now, what is this abstraction? Abstraction is one of the most important pillar of OOPS that says that user user have to hide as a programmer. If user is having a class or user is making a class, then user as a programmer has to hide the important features for the purpose of security and just show the features which are required or which are essential. So this is what the concept of abstraction is. When we talk about the interface, so interface makes it possible that we can achieve abstraction in any of the class or in any of the program. How interface is making it possible? Interface is having the abstract methods as well as the abstract definitions by which if user wants to use that particular interface or that particular definition in, then firstly user has to implement that interface. After that, user will be able to create the definition of the methods and so on. So this we have already discussed. Now let's talk about what are the default methods in interfaces. So before Java 8, that is when the eighth version or eighth edition of Java was launched, interfaces could have only one abstract method. So it was a restriction on the interfaces that if an interface is there, then it can have only one abstract method. So there was a problem that user has to, create n number of interfaces, n number of abstract methods because an interface can contain only one abstract method. And wants to implement more than one abstract method, then user has to create n number of interfaces. So the implementation of these methods has to be provided in a separate class. So if a new method is to be added in an interface, then its implementation code has to be provided in the class implementing the same interface. So if class A is there, class B is there, class C is there, and interface I is there, so whatever class will wants to implement that interface, the definition of the abstract method of that interface has to be present in that class which is implementing the interface. Now, to overcome this issue, Java 8, that is the 8th edition of Java, has introduced the concept of default methods, which allow the interface to have methods with implementation without affecting the classes that implement the interface. Now, default methods were introduced in Java 8 to allow the addition of new methods to interfaces without breaking the existing implementation. Default methods have default implementations provided in the interface itself. Let's understand this term with the help of an example. For example, list or collection interfaces do not have for each method declaration. Thus, adding such method will simply break the collection framework implementation. So Java 8, that is 8th edition of Java, introduced default methods so that list collection interface can have a default implementation for each method, and the class implementing these interfaces need not the implementation of that same method. For example, there is a syntax that we are having an interface and the name of the interface is vehicle and the type of the interface is public and it has a default method void print. Now we can have the definition of this default method is that we are going to print system.out.println I am a vehicle. Now, there is a class which wants to extend or which wants to implement this interface. Now, that particular class can change the working or change the definition of this void. So, this is what the benefit of having default methods in the interface. Now, as we say that we can implement or we can have the multiple interfaces in the same class, so that particular statement can create the ambiguity in our program. For example, when we are having multiple defaults, okay, so in a particular interface, we are having a default method, but when in such interfaces there are 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 or n number of interfaces are there, then we can have n number of defaults. So when we will be having n number of defaults, then it can cause the ambiguity. So let's see how this ambiguity will occur and how it will be resolved. For example, when we will be having a default function in interface, so there might be possible that the class which is implementing two interfaces with the same default method can have the ambiguity. Okay, let's understand this by the help of the example. For example, there is interface and the interface, the name of the interface is vehicle. And in this interface, we are having a default method that is void print. And in this default method, we are having the definition of this method that is I am a vehicle. Again, we are having the second interface and the name of the second interface is four-wheeler. Because both the interfaces are the public interfaces, that means any of the user can extend or can implement these interfaces. Okay. So now again in this we are having the same default method that is default void print, and we are having the definition also, and the definition is I am a four-wheeler. Okay. So this is what there are two interfaces there, and both the interfaces are having the same default method, and the same default method name is void print, but the definition of both the methods is different. Now there is a class and the name of the class is class car. Now when this particular class will implement vehicle and four vehicle. Okay. So the problem is that although in this slide directly solution is mentioned, so the problem is that ambiguity can be occurred. Why ambiguity can be occurred? Ambiguity can be occurred because the vehicle class is having the definition of its own method and the four-wheeler class is having the definition of its own method. Now, what definition will be considered? Okay, this is the problem. The solution is that first solution is that when we will be having the multiple defaults, that we can create or the class can create its own method that will override the default implementation. Okay, so class will be containing its own method. So when a class car implements the vehicle and four-wheeler both the interfaces and will be having its own void print method, then what it will be have it will do, it will give its own implementation, it will give its own definition. Okay, and what is the definition and what is the execution of this void print method? There is a statement that has to be printed, and the statement is I am a four-wheeler car vehicle. So what will be done? This statement will override the default methods of the vehicle class as well as the four-wheeler class. So the first concept is when we will be having the multiple defaults and there is a chance that ambiguity can be occurred, then we have to use the default implementation so that the earlier implementations can be override. Now, next solution to this ambiguity is that we can use the keyword super whenever we want that interfaces, three interfaces, four interfaces, or they are there, and we want to use the definition of only one interface. At that point of time, we can use the super keyword. Like we have a class car and which is implementing the interface vehicle and four-wheeler, and we don't want to give the definition of the method in the class car. In earlier example, we have given the definition, but we want to use the already defined. We don't want to give the a new definition. So if we will be giving the new definition, it will be overridden. But we are having already interfaces are having its own method and every method is having its own definition. We just want to use that definition. But the doubt can be created that vehicles definition will be considered or four-wheeler definition will be considered. In that case, what we can do, we can use the firstly the name of the method that is void print, which is the name of the method, and then we can use the super keyword. Okay, so how we can use the super keyword? We can mention the name of the class, sorry, the name of the interface. We can do this with class also, but can be used with the class also. But here we are using this super keyword with the interfaces. So that is why we should take the name interface. So firstly, we have to mention the name of the interface, dot super keyword, and dot the name of the method. So here, the name of the first class or the class that the interface or the class, both are the same when we will be working with the class. So in place of interface, we have to put the name of, but here, as we are discussing the interfaces, so we should consider this from the point of view of an interface. So if we want to use the definition of the vehicle interface, then we have to mention the name of the vehicle interface. if we want to use the definition of the four-wheeler interface, then we have to mention the name of the four-wheeler interface. Dot super keyword dot the name of the method. And what is the name of the method here? Print. So here there is no implementation of or no definition of main method, that is the print method in the class car, because class car is having the method but it wants the definition from the vehicle class. And what is the definition in the vehicle class? Let's check. And vehicle class says that I am a vehicle, so the statement that will be printed is I am a vehicle. But if we want the definition of the four-wheeler, then rather than using the vehicle, we have to use the interface four-wheeler followed by the super keyword and the name of the method. So this is how we can solve the problem of ambiguity when we will be having the multiple defaults. So in this section, we have learned about default methods in interfaces in Java. So I hope now you are having the clarity that what is the concept of default methods in Java, what are the drawbacks default methods are containing with itself, and how those drawbacks can be removed. We'll see you in the next session. Thank you so much.